Welcome to Absurd and Report Podcast. I'm Derek.
And I'm Josh.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are here today to talk about the Source family.
Dun dun dun. I feel like there's definitely an overlap between hippie jam bands and 70s cults, 100%.
So this episode of Absurd and Report is brought to you by deadcanvas.com. So please check them out. You can find them on Instagram, deadcanvasart at Instagram. And we all got together earlier this week and watched The Source Family. It's a documentary, and it basically follows the rise and then almost surely inevitable fall of pretty much like the archetype for early 70s Southern California spiritual movements. And it almost became a parody in of itself.
It was definitely very cartoonish. And also, I was kind of surprised that I had never heard of it. It's another one of those things where it's...
But you did, though. It's been, like, satirized so much that, like...
I didn't know what it was satirizing, though. You know what I mean?
Well, it's my favorite cult. Mm-hmm. I see it pretty much nuance... the culture that we see today, especially, when we saw Jared Leto's cult pics pop up.
Certainly.
The first thing I thought of was the Source family. It looked exactly the same.
Similarly dressed, definitely.
The white long... I'm all about the aesthetic of all the white clothes.
The white Jesus robes.
Listen, I don't know what it is about it, but it's, like, spooky, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, like the white Jesus robes doesn't mean that you're in a cult.
If I lived in this time period, I probably would have been in a cult. I probably wouldn't have been not committed to the cult, but, I would have been, like, on some otherworldly shit where I would have been like, this is great for 10 days. That was fun.
What was the name of the actual documentary you watched? It's just called The Source Family?
It's called The Source Family. It's directed by Jody Willie and Maria Demopoulos. I don't know if I am exactly saying that right.
They're all related to each other, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Oh, no, I thought you said, is Jody and Willie two people, or is the person's name Jody Willie?
No, Jody Willie and Maria Demopoulos.
That's all I was trying to clarify.
Jody Willie.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like it had won some awards. It was very aesthetically pleasing to watch. Whoever, really did the editing for this film did a really great job. There was lots of really good photos and documentaries. I know... the girl who goes by Isis the Aquarian made all this possible because she essentially kept journals and documented everything, making this documentary possible.
Is that what a lot of the photos and videos come from in the movie?
Yeah, these all come from her archive.
I was kind of wondering, I was like, how did they have this much shit, like...
Well, Isis the Aquarian thought it was her job to document everything because Father Yod kind of instilled her to be that way, to do so. That was like her job.
What's a little background on this guy? Like, how the hell did he decide?
Yeah, let's definitely get into...
How did he decide that he was just going to become this...
So, Father Yod, a.k.a. James Edward Baker, who was born July 4th, 1922, was the American owner of one of the country's first health food restaurants called the Source Family. I think it was just called the Source Restaurant, Restaurant. And it was located in Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. And they had taken over like a house in the Hollywood Hills. They were really they were like staples of the Sunset Strip back in the early...
This is very early 70s.
Yeah.
Because the restaurant was like
I think 1970.
And wasn't the restaurant like wildly popular with local
The
celebrities?
Source restaurant at that time, they were saying, was the hippest place to be in LA.
Everybody went there. Goldie Hawn, Marlon Brando,
Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell, yeah, who was hanging out with Goldie Hawn, just eating. John Lennon and Yoko Ono were there. They loved to get protein shakes, apparently. That was their jam.
So it's kind of like one of the first places in the Hollywood area that caters strictly to vegetarianism.
And maybe in the country, it was definitely...
That's kind of where that joke, too, comes from, that veganism is a cult.
Yeah.
Because it kind of all started with the Source family when they started their first vegan restaurant.
Yeah, it was very...
And he didn't have just one restaurant. He had multiple vegan restaurants.
He was a restaurateur.
Different names?
Different names, all up on that strip, which kind of gave him the funding and the background to lead into this cult and more so like healthy, hippie-like behavior.
So it was like his cash cow to just keep it running.
He had the Aware Inn, which was one of the first health stores in the country, and then the Old World restaurant, which actually became a chain and rather successful.
Yeah.
But you were talking about the money to fund this. So he was a restaurateur, yes, but he was also a bank robber.
Yes,
that's
he robbed several banks. Okay, James Edward Baker was not just your normal class act fucking dude, okay? So apparently, he has seen some shit. Apparently, he was in the Marine Corps during World War II. Yep. They say he got a Silver Star, but they could not find that receipt anywhere else. Like, the military doesn't have that
So he probably
receipt.
made it up.
He probably has a receipt. But apparently in, 1955, he killed 2 dudes with his judo chops because he was, a jujitsu, savant.
I don't even remember that part of the movie.
Yeah, and he
was acquitted.
Oh, okay.
Self-defense.
Yeah.
He also got into an affair with a famous actress. I forget her name. Her name was Linda something. And we're just going to call her Linda something.
Yep. Linda something.
And apparently when her husband tried to call out Mr. Baker, he judo chopped him and then shot him.
Oh, Jesus. How'd he get away with that one?
Whoa, Nicole.
I mean, there is no particular... There was no fine line on how they never really talked about that much.
I think he did time.
Yeah, I mean, he probably. I mean, they did in the movie kind of say that he went away for just a little bit, but I don't think it would have been enough to cover judo chopping and shooting someone to death.
Sometimes people get out of jail fairly quick for a murder.
Especially if he judo chopped 2 people and killed them back in 1955.
Yeah, it's a pattern of behavior.
I'm saying if I judo chop and killed multiple people, I'd probably in jail, and probably not getting out anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it was a judo chop, and it was a gunshot to the head.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
shooting a wound. Let's
no,
put it that way.
He basically executed the guy. So that's a little background on Jim. He's a little eccentric. He's got a violent history, but there's something that's drawn him to well-being and health. I think it was due to the fact that he grew up or befriended the founder of Bragg's and health foods, and this guy was like one of the first health food nuts.
Oh, all right.
Bragg's apple cider vinegar. You still see it in stores.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say.
He befriends this guy, and he starts really going towards this betterment and self-betterment, and then the mid-60s happen, and it's something that I don't think many people could have prepared for. Vietnam War starts becoming way, way, way out of control.
When did Vietnam War start? Late 50s?
I want to say Vietnam War started in 1955.
Okay.
Or the conflict.
Yeah, the beginnings of it.
And then the fall of Saigon.
Yeah.
1975.
Jesus Christ, dude. What a long-ass war.
So they're in the middle of Vietnam War. Enter psychedelics. Enter the basically dismantling of Leave It to Beaver, 50s kind of suburban home living. Kids are rebelling against their parents. That combined with all of the political tension and, like we said, the war just made a perfect storm for people to just start looking elsewhere for answers.
So He later became a follower of Yogi Bhan, spiritual leader and the teacher of Kundalini Yoga. And if you don't know what Kundalini Yoga is, it's a lot of breathing. Okay. It's very awkward when a bunch of people do it in a room.
Can you show me a video of it or something like that?
It's just a bunch. It's like if you are watching a pregnant woman give birth and they ask her to breathe. Do those.
So it's like a Lamaze class. That's what.
Yeah. Just picture doing that with 20 other people. Probably couldn't do it now. COVID-19 restrictions, but. He really took up this really healthy lifestyle watching this guy, Yogi Bhan, who had all the money in the world. Because at that time, he was really playing out to lots of cults and lots of healthy nut people on acid, lots of believers who thought that this was the way to be.
He was like a rock star.
He was. He had 5 Rolls Royces. He had
Jesus Christ.
He had like a mansion, like a big estate. It was like 8 times the size of fucking Jim Baker's in the Hollywood Hills. Mm-hmm. And he kind of like with wide eyes accepted Yogi Bhan and became such a avid believer. And that's kind of when the cult stuff started happening. He became to find himself. That's when he kind of changed his name over from Jim Baker over to Father Yad.
And this is like May 1970.
He kind of starts picking up people who are following his cult-like tendencies and beliefs through the restaurants. And they're kind of people who work for him. There have been people, too, who... I forget one of the Aquarians. Oh, if you didn't know, by the way, the people who got induced into this cult ended up all changing their names to Starfire the Aquarian, like Isis the Aquarian. It was all something the Aquarian because, the Aquarian belief was the dawn of a new age.
Okay.
And it was supposed to last like 2,000 years or something.
What geeked me out the most about that documentary is everyone they interviewed that used to be in the cult, they used their cult names. They
changed their name to that legally, that's legally their name now.
I doubt that their names are still legally those names.
I'd be too lazy to change it back, because it ain't easy to do that now.
I don't know, I think after 40 years, you might want to change your name back to...
But, they started out with, like, this whole kind of thing where there was no secret that it was a cult. Where they even, at face value, admitted that it was pretty easy to recognize that there was cult-like behavior going on. This is, like you were saying, Nicole, after he started hanging out with his yogi, doing the Kundalini, that's when things started to really start to change. That's when he started really implementing these systems of control over his followers, where people were giving up all of their worldly possessions to just go wash dishes at the Source restaurant. People are successful in giving up their entire lives.
And then he ended up forming with Jim Baker, Father Yad, to form Yehovah 13. And they put out a ton of records and shit.
65, actually.
Yeah.
65 records.
Fucking records? That's more records than Bad Religion.
What are they, a grindcore band?
65? They said they would do these long improv sessions and they would just be recording. And I think they said it was, some of these records are some of the most sought after collectibles of all time.
I was going to say, there's this common theme with cults from around then, from the 60s and 70s. And actually, even... I think one in the 90s made a Flexi record as well, the Hanley's Comic one or whatever. But they would all make records. Like, they all put out albums. And some of them you can find on YouTube, but, like, if actually finding copies of them, they're worth hundreds to thousands of dollars.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. And if you could see some of these records, they were, like, hand-painted covers. Yeah. They were definitely...
They're all DIY assembled shit,
But, like, with DIY on another level.
Yeah.
Of DIY
like
of someone who's different, on acid with unlimited time.
Yep.
You can get some serious shit done.
Uh-huh.
So, like we were saying, things are starting to change. And Jim, the father, he decides anyone who's underage in the family needs to get married. for legal reasons because the heat's starting to come down. He's got a lot of underage people hanging out.
They passed a law in that year.
Did they?
Yeah, that's why.
So he was dangerously teetering on a lot of statutory
It seems like there's a lot of shadowy molestation crap going on.
He had 14 wives, but he was never legally married to any of them.
So once he started marrying people off, what he considered a spiritual boot camp really starts. So that's when that's when the family is becoming a real family. And this is when he starts setting up daily regimens for all of his followers, which includes the sacred herb, which is taking real long extended hits of pot in the morning, and then doing the Kundalini, and then basically just prepping your mind for reprogramming.
Gotcha.
Boom. So, sex plus drugs equals babies.
Yeah.
Lots of babies.
There was also that one story of the guy who felt like Father Yod was truly a god because he was doing some Kundalini in the restaurant at one time, and he touched the back of him, and it said it shot it shot like whatever down his spine.
Like electricity up his spine.
Yeah, he said it was like a straight shot of electricity through his spine, and that he thought that he saw Father Yod as a god, and it made all sense.
So let me tell you this: if I'm sitting in a fucking restaurant, I don't want to see some old man stretching around and wheezing all over the place. That's two things I don't want to look at. Well, I'm trying to eat a goddamn sandwich. That's not what I want to watch.
See, here we go with the heavy cult shit. This is 1972. Babies are starting to be born in the family. He performs.
He also had his own kid with Robin that grew up in the cult.
Robin's their daughter. I forget her name.
Tao. Born August 14th, 1974.
Fucking, of course, her name is Tao.
So this is in 1972. He performs apparently a miracle in front of a bunch of his followers, where there's a baby that's born, that's apparently a stillborn with the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, and he breathes life into the baby and reanimates the baby after it being dead.
So he CPR'd it? Is that what you mean by breathes life into it?
He probably just slapped the baby on the butt and he started crying, and
they
all
said
these people
that
are saying,
the
it's a miracle.
umbilical cord was wrapped around the head of the baby, and the baby was pronounced dead on arrival, but he picked up the baby and spoke it to it. And the baby was suddenly alive again.
And so this is all testimony of people who have...
The baby looked at you? The Chief Wiggum.
And then the baby looked at me. Like we were saying, mid-1972, things are changing big time. This is when the father starts emulating some serious druid stuff. He starts getting into ceremonial magic. Combining ceremonial magic with LSD is a bad idea.
Fucking hippies.
Now, and they're at the point where things are changing so fast, all of his followers can't keep up. He's keeping them in a state of real confusion, which is kind of where, if you're a cult leader, where you want your followers to be.
If you give enough people acid and you kind of mold their brains while you're on acid, it would put you in a place to easily keep, like, having the power to mold people's brains to do so. You know, like, he was doing all sorts of weird Kundalini stuff. And then, you know, not to mention that they ended up having to move out of that mansion in the Hollywood Hills into a house that was smaller, but yet with more people.
I think they said they had 140 people living
at one point living there. Yeah,
3 bedroom, 3 baths.
None of them had their own money. They all had community money.
What does that mean? He's like making them wampum or some shit?
Yeah, no, like if you guys all did, like, went out and made your money for the day, you came home and you put it in a pot and they all shared it. It was all community money. Whatever you did together as a community.
Goddamn communists.
You fucking hippie communist bastards.
You know, and all of it is so strange too. It almost became like a lifestyle at the time too in that period, especially in Southern California. It was no surprise to the celebrities at this time that it was going on, and not to mention they opened up the Source Family Restaurant in 1969. You know what also is happening in 1969? Charles Manson.
Yeah, I was going to say, all the same time period.
That's
You
the
got
summer of
Woodstock.
love, right?
Woodstock's happening
Yep.
in 1969. The cult-like mentality and lifestyle was really taking off then. Like, even then, the Jim Jones
I was
is
going to ask you, Jim Jones, is that the same?
that's like mid-1970s.
Okay, so it's a little after, but
It's
definitely...
a little after the
definitely
Source family,
inspired
but you
by
get
it.
these 2 decades
Yeah.
with non-stop cult archetypes.
Jim Jones was taking notes.
Yeah.
I'd like to say.
Yep.
Certainly.
Especially, you get some really awesome, like, I wouldn't say awesome, but you get some really, like, cohesive Jim Jones influences, or not influences, rather, but he moved everybody to Kauai, I think? What is it, Kauai?
Kauai.
And,
I don't know why I said it like that.
what is it?
Kauai, Hawaii.
Jim Jones moved everybody to Mexico?
No, Guyana.
Yeah.
Same thing though, where you're moving a mass amount of people to another country.
Mhm.
They're following you. They think you're their god.
Yeah, he is isolating the shit out.
Yeah,
of
he's
them.
isolating and then bring them also to a place with more lax laws, so you do whatever the fuck he wants.
He also was arranging the marriages.
So he was arranging the marriages and beginning experimenting with sexual magic, and this is when the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn starts popping up with his stuff. His secret, which is a secret society for those who don't know, that studies occult metaphysics during the late 19th and 20th centuries. That we could do a whole episode on. Last podcast, I think, did a 3-parter on it.
I was going to say, they covered that at some point,
They
right?
covered the hell out of
Yeah.
it. So around when all of this, so this is getting really heavy stuff. And this is when people start dropping out. It's kind of like weeding out maybe the people who aren't 100% on this.
Yep.
Because Jim started foreseeing the apocalypse. He's really drilling home this transcendent kind of vibe that he is God. He is, all that matters in these people's lives. And this is
So you got a little too tripped out for some people's taste.
certainly.
Yeah. And, like, to really, like, put on how far out there, like, this cult was, like, they wore length-long white robes. They played in a band that had, like, 100 people in it.
Jesus.
They put, 67 records out?
Yep, 67,
They
65.
They're the Agathocles of cults.
Here are the name of his wives. Makushla, the Aquarian, Isis, Astral, Heaven, Prism, Aquariana, Aquariana, the Aquarian. First of all, let's just put that out
That's
there.
not
real quick.
redundant or anything. Huh?
Harvest Moon, Galaxy, Lovely,
Oh my god.
Peralta, Hypatia, Tenatalio, Venus, and Robin.
What a fucking asshole.
So they moved to Kauai, and they got a little bit backlash from the people who lived there,
Yeah, because most people don't want a fucking cult of smelly hippie assholes on acid.
A lot of the
moving into town.
newspapers in that time were putting out articles about the Source family and comparing them to the Manson family.
Yeah, especially with all the other cult stuff and the Manson murders, I'm sure there was a lot of hysteria going on, so people don't want a fucking cult moving
So
into
they
their town.
felt a sense of segregation from the people on the island.
And plus, and if you guys know anything about Hawaii, probably one of the toughest things about there is, like, the locals. The locals don't really want...
They're hard asses, yeah.
They don't really want you coming in and being like, oh, Hawaii, why, this is great.
Yeah.
And setting up shop. It's kind of just for, especially because I have a lot of friends who surf, and it's
Same.
it's a hard scene to break into.
Yep,
Let's just leave it at that.
Yep, you're completely right.
Yeah, and that was probably, I think they moved there in 73?
75.
75? No, can't be. 75.
I thought they moved there like a year before.
Oh,
his
no,
death.
no. He's... And it's in 1974 the Source family sold their restaurant and moved to Hawaii.
I forgot he sold it off, so he probably got some fucking absurd amount of money extra, like nest egg, off of that.
Certainly.
Does that restaurant still exist, by the way?
So the location is still there.
Okay.
It is not the Source family restaurant. I believe it is a Mexican restaurant now.
All right.
It's a little further down the street from El Coyote, which is where Sharon Tate had her last meal, which is still El Coyote, I believe.
So crazy all these assholes are out of this same area.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it really draws me in, and I can't help but notice some of the same characteristics in the original way Jim Bakker is described is kind of the way Brad Pitt's character is almost described in the new movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is that movie by Quentin Tarantino, which is about the Manson family and the cult and 1969 in general.
Still the only Tarantino movie I have yet to see, so I gotta bite that
so
one.
I did see a lot of Brad Pitt's characteristics come kind of a little close to this guy, and I feel like Quentin Tarantino really hit the nail on the head with the cult and the 1969 aesthetics with that movie. You should totally watch it. Everybody should watch it. It's one of my favorites. Very long, though. Very long, though.
Yeah, all his movies are fairly, 2.5, 3 hour kind of epics.
So, I believe, too, they started carrying guns when they moved to Hawaii because they were so paranoid.
Oh, they were being shot at, I guess. They said that, at a certain point they wanted to try to smooth things over with the locals. So they invited, the father, Jim, he invited, the local newspaper over. And it said by the time they did the interview, within 24 hours, they were shooting through their windows, the locals. They didn't want them there. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want disrupting their beautiful little community.
And probably didn't want them sucking up more gullible assholes into their cult.
They moved there and immediately applied for welfare. They weren't even planning. They weren't even faking that they weren't going to be.
No, they're just like, give us that money.
Yeah, they just were immediately applied for 140 people.
I was going to say that's a lot of fucking people in a small area to just start collecting welfare. They all live in the same house,
Yeah. So they moved to Hawaii on one of the islands, and on August 25th, 1975, Father Yod gets this really great fucking idea to possibly go hand gliding.
Called
and
hand gliding?
He tells his commune, essentially, he breaks it to all his wives that he's gonna go do this hand gliding thing because he feels like he needs to.
I just gotta glide, baby. That's what he said to all of them.
I just gotta glide, baby. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Glide or die.
So, good precedent. Man has no hang gliding experience.
So he breaks it to all of his wives that he's going to go hang gliding, and apparently, ISIS, who's probably recording it at the time, all you can hear is screams from these women, and they're like, I find their screams to be so funny and dainty. They don't sound like real screams.
Honestly,
they're like,
that was the funniest. That was the funniest part of the whole thing.
They're just like little yelps.
If he wasn't a scumbag, I wouldn't think his death was funny the way he goes out. But
So they all beg him to not go hang gliding, and he's just like this big bad dude. He's just like, I'm gonna go hang gliding if I want to, and he takes his sail all the way up to the top of a cliff of Kauai, on some cliff somewhere in Kauai, and
Lanakai.
Okay.
And he decides to jump off, except the wind in that very moment decided to stop. Hard right into the ocean.
Well, they said he tail spinned out,
Yeah.
and then the wind caught up again, but it was too late, and he just banged right in the ocean.
I think the word nosedive was used a couple times.
Yep.
Where he went straight down, apparently corrected.
Stupid asshole.
But then was headed for the ocean or a beach area, and
it's a 1,300-foot jump off that cliff.
It's no joke. It's no joke.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
It's no money slope.
Crash landed on the beach, suffering no external injuries, but was unable to move and died exactly 9 hours later. The Source family refers to this day as Black Monday, and they held ceremonies and vigils that lasted up to 3 days.
Well, wasn't he against going to get actual medical help? And he was he's like, leave me here.
His belief system that he had created for his followers would not allow for any kind of trip to a doctor. So he had become his own worst enemy. It was himself who has undone.
So he just sat there and bled out internally?
Right. And you remember there was a baby earlier who needed medical attention, and they didn't want him to take the baby to the hospital, and that was kind of when those two people had left the cult because they started to get ridiculous and they didn't agree with the underage marriages. It's none of what people sign for. It kind of takes away from the hippie vibes.
Yeah, the creepy molester aspect.
More into the free love creepy molesta aspect. So they thought that they couldn't touch the body for 3 days. The spirit really needed to have its proper passage into the next life. On his way out of dying, you have this circle that comes back where, he was the teacher who became the student yet again, because he said to everybody on his way out that he was just a man, that he wasn't a god.
Yeah, he finally admitted. He took a bunch of mushrooms and admitted that he was just, and he didn't say he was a con man.
Yeah.
But
But a man nonetheless.
And he kind of, rattled some of his followers by saying that, because he's been doing nothing day in and day out for years and years and years, doing everything he can to convince these people that he is fucking God. And then he just takes some magic mushrooms, goes for a walk, and is just like, no, you know what?
He's like, I'm a total fraud.
No. Just looks down at his hands.
Yeah, looks at, oh my god, I've been a total fraud this entire time.
So that was, so he dies in 75, and then 77, the family's kind of disbanded. Hippies get older, almost 10 years had gone by, 25 becomes 35 real quick.
Yep.
And, know, aren't all groovy. The 60s, were definitively over. 70s, late 70s, not exactly the greatest time for America. Really, some real dark times.
A lot of people call it the end of the hippie era when the Manson murders happened. That's for a lot of people, that marks the end of the fun and games.
When was Altamont?
That too. I believe early 70s was Altamont, which if you don't know is when there was a big hippie fest and they had the fucking... Was that they had the Hells Angels?
It was the Hells Angels at the Stones.
And they ended up killing
they had Hells Angels be security for Woodstock.
That incident at Altamont, though, with those bike gang, that's kind of marked as the end of the hippie era.
I think that's...
When shit turned to violence.
Well, that happened in Woodstock, too.
Yeah. So between cults and violence, that's kind of the two things.
People really don't talk about that in Woodstock, is the Hells Angels and how violent they were.
Yeah, you don't hear so much about it.
But there are still members of the family that live in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yehovah 13, the band that they were in, they were reunited in 2007.
Yeah, they actually still played music together.
Doing some stuff. It's very psych.
Yeah.
Very psych rock stuff. There was an interview at the end with Robin, who was the first wife of Jim Bakker.
And they're not a cult together anymore, right? They're like reformed and they're like, let's still play music together.
It doesn't really seem like there's much doctrine behind what they're doing. But this woman, Robin, who was the mother, she's got severe PTSD from all of this.
I wonder why.
She's
also
struggling
got disease.
big time. So
she takes lots of medication. I think at the end of the documentary you saw that she opened a kit that she said had 14 medications in it, I think there might have been more.
It's a lot of psych meds to eat daily.
But you know what I think about too is that I don't think that when you ignore your health needs for so long that it's a good thing for your long-running health in the future, because, like they said, they didn't believe in a lot of, Western medicine.
So they probably didn't go to a fucking doctor for, or get a physical or anything.
No, that's what I'm saying. So a lot of health problems probably went unnoticed when they could have been fixed, or, she could have gotten the proper nutrients or research that needed to be done to help with her physical issues earlier, nipped it in the bud. Her daughter, they interview her daughter. At the very end, her daughter was not really in it, but, they talked about she kind of had this separation from her true father, and kind of more so had so much sympathy for her mother, who seemed to get so caught up on Jim, even despite having 14 wives and thinking that child marriage was still okay. She couldn't let go of Jim Baker and the man she married. It's kind of like a really sad story. And not to mention, Isis is another one of his wives who kept all the archives and still to this day writes about the Source family.
One of the members that I found the most interesting when they were doing the wrap-up was this guy named Omni Aquarius.
Yeah.
He is now a student of Ramtha. And they said that at the end, and I was just like,
they didn't really elaborate on it, though, right?
And I said, I gotta know more.
Yeah.
So, what I do is I Google search Ramtha, and ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, my fucking eyeballs were not prepared for what slammed into the front and back of them simultaneously. Ramtha is a 35,000-year-old enlightened being who apparently is...
It's not the Dalai Lama?
No, who is...
He's like Gozer in Ghostbusters.
Who is channeled through a woman named Jay-Z Knight, who is basically...
If you were just going to say Jay-Z, I'm like, whoa.
Bro! The
sickest
have
bars.
the same shot.
He's got bars for days.
I actually think he's not a great rapper, but that's another episode.
We can get into that. But Ramtha, basically, is this enlightened being who is using this woman as an avatar. He speaks through her. Now, there's a lot of skepticism through this, but there's interviews with them side by side where this woman who is very calmly explaining her life and this and that, and then Ramtha part comes in a heavy Eastern European accent and starts going off on metaphysics and stuff like that. If you know the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? If you remember that movie.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
That was actually put out by students of Ramtha.
Oh, okay.
So it's important that we mention that Ramtha definitely has a problem with Jews and gays.
No, Jesus. They're like, one wasn't good enough, Yeah, gotta hate something.
Which, which I found maybe like 3 minutes into my research. I was just like, all right, whatever. But basically, one of the main teachings of this Ramtha, hoax is that everyone can create their own reality.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of those kind of, mental thinking is your key to your salvation kind of things. But more research shows that if that was the case, it creates its own philosophical paradox.
Okay.
And that's not the way things work.
They're not coinciding ideas.
No. We cannot manifest our own reality, because if that was the case, we would be chaos. It would be chaos by the very definition.
You'd be a supervillain.
To, add a few more things onto the Source family episode. First of all, and after doing acid this weekend,
hippie scumbag.
For the very first time, I can understand why these people felt so subjected and open-minded to Father Yod's like unrealistic belief system.
So if you'd like to join Nicole's new cult, you can email her at absurdandreport999@gmail.com. It's her actual email, and hit her up.
Please make sure that you put on the header, what you're interested in, what you look like. We need to know these things.
RE cult.
Yep. If you already own a white robe, or if she has to order one, she's gonna need your measurements.
Yeah, I'm gonna need your sizing, your guidelines.
If you happen to know your pullover robe sizes, I don't know.
I need to know your beliefs.
I don't know if it's a one size fits all kind of deal, or like.
Because we only shit gold in my cult, okay? So if your diet isn't on point, get the hell out.
Who do cults use for a tailor, you think?
It's an awful lot of white robes to just
I don't know. We asked Jared Leto these days.
Let's shoot that son of a bitch.
You guys got stock and togas.
So, I feel like, too, when I was doing acid, and I did it with a friend of mine, I couldn't help but especially doing it for the first time, it was so easy for me to think the person that I was doing it with was this interdimensional space being from another planet that was like giving me suggestions on how to open my mind.
Not a hard sell at that point.
You know, yeah, I know. I was all gung-ho. I was like Guns Akimbo, but with acid.
But I mean, it tracks. You know, if you think of government-sponsored mind control, MK Ultra projects,
they use a lot of hallucinogens.
It all centralizes around LSD, and they really did think it was the key to breaking and maybe putting back together the human the psyche.
Which they're not wrong.
They're totally not wrong.
Yeah.
They're totally not wrong. You know, I've met people who have gone on trips and not really come back.
Yeah, it's happened to numerous friends of mine. People's brain can't fucking handle it, or it triggers like a latent schizophrenia.
Well, you're not supposed to, you're only supposed to do only acid once every 24 hours or something.
Well, I wouldn't recommend doing it once every 24 hours.
No, you're only supposed to take a tab in 24 hours, and then you're not supposed to do it again for a while.
Yeah, because what happens is you have the tolerance factor is very high, so if you do it one day and you try to eat it the next day, sometimes it won't do anything.
Yeah, well, so I felt the after effects of taking it definitely for a few days, especially my eyes were very sensitive to light. Mm-hmm. And I could still feel like I could see light trailing for a few days. But I could understand how these people would think it's the new holier than art thou thing to be doing.
Especially when I wasn't around for a while.
Exactly.
So
it's kind of
people hadn't even smoked weed before.
Yeah.
And they're taking headfuls of acid every day. You could, and he literally convinced them that he was God. And I can see it. I can see it
happening. Yeah.
The way that they looked aesthetically speaking looks like they were on acid all the time.
People, places, and,
they were
and things are gonna set
flowing dresses, all the pictures of them in the yard doing their laundry.
Their eyes all fucking dilated as shit in a lot of the pictures.
All the pictures of them on the cars, and all of them with the long robes, and all of it was just so almost free-spirited until they got into their weird belief system, but I could totally understand how they got there. And I just think a lot of these people did way too many drugs, and they were easily formidable into these ways of thinking. Yeah, it's easily molded.
It's easy to manipulate someone when they're fucked up as shit on drugs.
Especially all the time, because I believe in the movie several times they said that he walked around and dosed them.
What a guy.
So
classy dude.
That would surprise me zero.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Absurd and Report. We have our first sponsor that I'd like to give a shout out to. This episode is partially being brought to you by deadcanvas.com. They have an Instagram. It is deadcanvasart. And we have a featured artist of the week. His name is J-Rock. On deadcanvas.com you can find all of these really cool art prints, stickers, custom hats and t-shirts and stuff. J-Rock is our artist of the week. You can find him at 8 up art on Instagram and also on Dead Canvas. So for Absurd and Report, I'm Derek.
I'm Josh.
And Nicole.
Please join us next time.
And cults are bad. Don't forget that.
Okay.